Shield of Faith Church Unplugged. Today, Carla Salazar, certified school counselor, and Pastor Scott Cummings are joining us again for an honest and open discussion on this week's topic, depression. My name is Tanya Cummings, and I will be your unseen host for the night. We encourage you to ask questions in the comment section. We'd love for you to leave a comment introducing yourself and letting us know where you're joining us from. With that being said, let's get unplugged and dive into tonight's discussion topic. Welcome back, guys. How are y'all this evening?
Doing great.
Doing great? Yeah. All right. So are y'all ready for tonight's discussion? Round two.
Let's get it on.
One that's very familiar to many people. And so let's go ahead. Let's start off when it comes to depression. Let's just start in with Pastor Scott over here. What is the definition of depression?
The definition that I have, or the one I looked up and saw, just define depression as this. It's a group of conditions associated with the elevation or lowering of a person's mood.
And I want to kind of talk about like the symptoms of depression. Because it is a lowering of a mood. But what I feel like is interesting is that depression isn't always like, it is sometimes not being able to get out of bed, not being able to sleep, actually sleeping too much. It can go both ways. You can overeat or undereat and not eat anything at all. Crying. I think that like the stereotypical depression is like someone is always crying. And I want to kind of debunk that a little bit. Depression can look like spending all day in bed or fake smiling. I know that, and I'm going to share a little bit when it comes to me. I battled postpartum depression, and I do believe that it was that influx. I didn't battle it with my girls. I just battled it with Caleb. And after I had Caleb, my son, who was my first baby, I do believe that it was a shift in my hormones that caused something in me to change, and it was rough. But I fake smiled, like nobody would have ever known that I was dealing with depression, and so I think that that's something that I want to like highlight is it's not just crying and not getting out of bed, but it can be, going through the motions.
Some people can hide it.
Yeah, and really well. Like people can hide it really well. And even like, social isolation or erratic behavior. What's crazy is, someone that normally doesn't go and do all these crazy things, doing all these crazy things, not having a zest for life, but almost, being too reckless. And so those can be signs and symptoms of depression.
Withdrawn.
Yeah, withdrawn. And not being, I think, always checking on your people when it's not the normal who they are. We talked about anxiety last week, but anxiety and depression can sometimes go hand in hand,
Yep.
I'm curious what, different people that are watching have experienced when it comes to depression.
Yeah, if you're watching with us online, and we really do want you to interact with us, so let us know what your thoughts are. If you have questions or comments or experiences that you're willing to share, post that, and we will, definitely want to bring that to the table. And I can say so far, we do have several people that are checking in and saying that they're joining us, and we do appreciate y'all joining with us tonight. Carla, I can definitely say that the different descriptions that you gave in regards to people that are going through depression, that is such an honest look at it, because we tend to think automatically that someone that's depressed, that you could basically just see it physically on them, that they're going to be completely like physically withdrawn, that they're not going to go to think. There are people that are just so used to living in that depression that they just have kind of found their own ways to survive, and they're not necessarily living in happiness, but they're just surviving, barely surviving. And So that being said, like, what are some things that when you notice that someone is experiencing that withdrawal, or maybe even ourselves, like when we're going through that, what are some of the things that we can do to kind of help either pull someone out or even pull ourselves out?
I definitely, and I'm going to preface, I'm not a doctor, and I know Pastor Scott's going to say the same thing. So if you are needing help, and I know that we talked about if the National Suicide Hotline, is that in the
It's been posted, yes.
Okay, good. One of the things that's really big is people do go get help if they need help, but also listening for different things that people say, like, I don't want to be here anymore, or it's just not worth it. Like listening to the different things they say, or a change in how they say things, like being the person that went through the motions and kept smiling and nobody would have ever known. I think that somebody looking from that, and I was a new mom, so nobody knew any different. But like, there were probably little things that I said, and we were talking before, and I liked what Ashlyn had mentioned, that don't feel guilty if you don't recognize it right away.
Right.
Like, I mean, what do you think? Like,
I think also one of the other tell signs is when you ask somebody how they're doing and they say, I'm okay.
yeah, that's a good point.
I think a lot of times people, especially when they are going through depression, that is one of their common answers that they would say, I'm okay, I'm just okay. Everything's fine. And there's an underlining part of that they're not.
Yeah.
And in this whole process, I think in this process is that there's key things that others need to pay attention to, but I think also if you are someone who is feeling depression and stuff, that it is something that you need to be aware of yourself. Because a lot of times it's easier to see it in somebody else and not see it in yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think this topic, just like with anxiety that we talked about last week, the same thing is this affects everyone. It doesn't matter age, race, gender. It doesn't matter who you are, male or female. This affects everybody. And it's something that really needs to be looked at closer. And I would say we need to pay more attention to it.
I agree. What's crazy is as you're talking and I'm listening, and what's interesting is where you could have seen it was in my house. I almost lived like it was awful. Like it's not that I didn't clean. I cleaned up the spots that I needed to, right? But like my closet, different areas that I could hide, that's where the pileup was. That's where the buildup was. And I didn't want to invite anybody to my house because then they would see, right? And so I spent a lot of time out of the house. And that was super interesting when I think about it now. The first year and a half of Caleb's life, actually he was saying today, he goes, man, when I get in the car, I just want to go to sleep. And I'm like, we were always in the car. So for him, that was normal. We were always going somewhere. We were at the mall all the time. I just couldn't be alone, but I didn't want to be close enough to be with people that would hold me accountable. And that, I didn't want to have these in-depth conversations with people, because then maybe they would find out that I was struggling. But then I also didn't want to be all by myself because that was scary and that wasn't in my nature. I'm a natural, I test 100% extrovert. So I am 100% get my energy from people, and that didn't change in me. I just would be at the mall and nobody knows me at the mall, I didn't even spend money, which is really weird because I'm a shopper. But I would just take Caleb in the stroller and we would go to different places, and it was sad. But I'm grateful. And one of the things we talked about is about talking to people. And I'm grateful for the people Tanya saved me in a lot of ways. Like my mom saved me, my sister, and then obviously Rick, because like have this sweet little baby, and I loved him, and I was going through the motions. But then when Rick would get home, I'd hand the baby to him and be like, I gotta go walk away because I am been going through the motions and I'm exhausted. And y'all, if you're exhausted doing normal, please reach out to somebody. Like, it's hard. You shouldn't be exhausted doing normal. You know what I'm saying?
We also talked about this at the beginning part too, is that we don't think about the other people, that the individual that is going through the depression, how it affects them,
Yes.
and what they go through. And it does put a burden on, especially if it's a family situation, that it could affect the spouse, the kids. It affects everybody when it's done, especially in a household, and it doesn't matter who the individual is, it affects them all. So depression doesn't just affect the individual that is being depressed, it affects everyone around it. Like you were saying, it's important to talk. Find somebody to confide in and talk. Also, I think it's so important for us also to actually listen. And I think that's
powerful.
important as well, to just listen to what is going on. And I'll say it, sometimes we say too much. So listening is actually better than just saying too much.
So we have
So
some
I
conversation
will
going on
say that.
online. Pastor says that children can be depressed also. And then
Can I comment on that really fast? Let me comment on that.
Absolutely.
I have kiddos that, like, I've had to bring to my office and say, hey, sweetheart, you're going to have to take a bath. That is a red flag. And of course, I talk to their parents, and like, you know, it looks like they just got out of bed, and we talk about their mental health, and we talk, you know, I talk to their parents, and I advocate that they get an outside counselor. And I just have to say that, yes, kids come into my office all the time. So thank you for saying that, Pastor. But one thing too, like, some kids come into my office and say, I feel depressed. And I'm like, okay, what does depressed mean? And then they say something that's like, they've heard a buzzword. And it's not what they think it is, and we have a conversation about that. And then sometimes kids, I have to reach out to kids because they do not look like they did a couple weeks ago, or you know, like you can see a huge difference in them.
I would think in kids, it would be less likely to be the ones to make the first step to reach out,
Yeah,
because they don't know how to express themselves.
regulate their emotions.
And
Yeah.
I would think with them especially that it would be a little bit, it would probably be especially more on the adult side to pay attention to signs and look for different things. But
So
like we
one of
said
the
earlier,
question-
it doesn't, this depression affects all ages.
I agree.
It's not just
A
adults
question
only.
that we have is, what kind of things can you say to reach out to someone? So I'm going to say that, but I'm going to go ahead and just read real quickly. We do have a comment from Jill that says, I felt like no one understood. In fact, the opposite happened, and negative punishment kept coming to me. What showed it in me was that I started giving up and not caring about things I truly did care about, like my career. It was hard to go home by myself. I was exhausted and emotional, which isn't like me. And I didn't truly understand that I was getting super depressed until I was actually out of the situation. So thank
That's
you
a
so
good
much for
point.
sharing,
Thank you for sharing that.
with us, your experience. So what kinds of things can you say to reach out to someone that is feeling depressed?
Tiger, no. I think you're not alone. And what Scott was saying, you know, I agree with just standing with someone. You know, I'm praying for you. I'm here for you. You want a hug? Hug it out. Y'all know me and my 20-second hugs. You know, I definitely am. Hey, do you want a hug? How are you holding up?
Let me say something about prayer. I think so many times we'll say, I'm praying for you. And we don't really pray.
That's a good point.
The thing in this is that if you're going to say those words, then actually take the time and pray right where you're at. Especially if that's with that individual at that moment, at that time, pray for them. You know, maybe you're at work well, you don't have to necessarily pray out loud.
Yeah.
Pray quietly, but pray for that individual right then and there. They need to know that people are with them, that they're not alone.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we say, like I said earlier, we say so many things, but yet we don't put the action behind it. Here, especially with depression, there has to be some type of action. Positive reinforcement is another way that we can use to help someone that is being depressed. But of course, even with saying that, it depends upon the situation that they're going through, and not everyone is going through the same thing. That's where you really have to, that talking to or sharing, find someone that you can confide in and trust, that you can share what you're going through, and the trust is the part here. It's the trust. I would look at what Jill had in her question and said that it became a punishment and a negativity. And I think so many times that's what happens when we don't share what we're going through or what we're feeling and nobody else knows. It can spiral that way and turn that way, and it looks like everything around you is falling apart when it's not necessarily really falling apart, but in our brains and our minds, that's what we think and that's what we see, and which causes us to go further and further in that depression, and it's harder, or it feels like it's harder and harder to get out of it.
We have another comment. Gloria said, I had a friend that passed away because she was depressed and she refused help. She shut her family out of her life and didn't take care of herself, which caused major health issues. So it definitely can physically, affect us too, correct?
Yes.
Carla?
Well, and I'm glad that you said that. There's a couple things I wanted to comment on. Name it to tame it. Guys, there is something in us that we need to, and I do believe that scripture verse that you said last week, with all things with prayer and supplication. Prayer is a form of getting it out and talking to God, right? And then when we talk, we're supposed to bear each other's burdens. And so talking to people, right? When you say it out loud, there are times where I tell Rick, I just need to say this out loud. And once I say it out loud, then it doesn't seem to be so big anymore. Like the enemy does go around like a roaring lion, wanting to devour, right? And I think that secret place in your mind, and when you say it out loud, then you're like, hey, wait, oh gosh, that wasn't as bad as I thought, or it wasn't as, that doesn't seem as big as what I thought it was. And so I do feel like, when, I was going to call her glowy. And I'm like, it's so weird. When my mom was like, it causes health issues. When you keep it in and you hold it in, yes, for sure that. Absolutely. Because your body, it takes a toll on your body. I do believe depression takes a toll on your body. And I also want to point out that, sometimes people struggle with underlying health conditions that can cause depression. So one of the things to be careful, I know that people battle their thyroid, and that can cause an influx in stuff, hormones and stuff. So just be aware too that if you are feeling depressed, right, go to your doctor and talk to your doctor, because I know that you could find an underlying health condition that you didn't realize you were battling.
Yes. We had someone too that we actually have a couple more comments here from Jade. So good, so grateful for this conversation. And then Connie said that I've lost those that I love to suicide, and it's tragic for all who love them. And I myself too have lost loved ones to suicide, and it really is. And I'm so glad that we are talking about this, because these are real situations. And then Pastor says, if you are in a leadership role, you sometimes don't want to say anything because you don't want to seem like you don't have everything under control.
True talk.
So true.
True talk, Pastor.
I was going to say the same thing. That is so true, that stigma that comes, that you just can't be complete, you feel like I've got to, I'm the one that's got to have it all together. But the truth is that we're all human. What do y'all say to this?
Well, you said it. That's the thing I think we don't grasp is that we are all just human. Doesn't matter what your position, your role, who you are. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether you're whatever your race, your ethnicity. None of these things matter in that aspect. We all come underneath it. And I think so many times, especially those that are in leadership, we don't want to express what we're going through. And to be honest with you, we should, because it shows yourself to be more real.
Yeah.
And that you can face these things just like anybody else does. And to be honest, people need to actually see that, especially if you are in leadership roles, because you may be able to help somebody that's out there. And one of the things that I will say in this, that one of the things I've learned, especially in my time in ministry, is that some of the things that we walk through in life is for our growth and our lesson. We have to, it is also so that we need to look at what we're going through in our leadership roles, and we are more open, and people can see us. We may be able to help somebody that we don't know, or we haven't seen, or they haven't said anything, that they're going through something, and you may be able to even join forces with them to where y'all can help each other. So to me, that's one aspect of this that really that's a good point Pastor made.
Well, and I think it takes the stigma off of mental health, because we're not scared as leaders to share that we're dealing with physical ailments.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So like, just because we're battling in our mind, that change, like it's like we're weaker or something, and that's not true. We all, have, we all battle. I mean, that's the thing, and worship is such a powerful way to battle, but we all battle. And the other thing is, thank you, Connie, for sharing. These are hard things to share. And I appreciate, I can see like little comments. And I appreciate you sharing, because it stinks. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, it stinks that people are struggling and don't feel like there's hope. And I'm so grateful there's hope in the Lord. But to be really honest, the church has got to make a decision together that we're not going to allow people to feel hopeless anymore, that we're going to reach out, that we're going to, love on people. And love doesn't just look like, I love you, friend. Love is like digging in there and like you're saying, like
we've never been designed to go through this alone.
Alone, yep.
Even Adam, as he was created first in the garden, he couldn't do it alone.
Yeah.
God created Eve. He needed a helpmate. Even in this walk, in this journey called life, we need others around us.
And it's scary to need others, y'all. Like in that way, like I need others like in fun, like, but in the way of like, oh, I'm about to cry, or I am struggling so bad. That's scary. That is a scary, risk-taking thing to do. But you are called for such a time as this. You're created for such a time as this. So it's so important that like you bring it, or you help someone when you think they need help bringing it,
I wanted to address something that Connie said here real quick. She said sometimes a person does not have the words to help them feel better. And I just wanted to address this. I remember when Tanya's mom was passing, and it was in her last days and really months. I did not have any words to say to her. There was nothing that I could physically say to her that was going to make her feel any better than what she was going through. The only thing I could do was be there.
Yeah.
And I made it a point to be there. And that was the best thing that I could do for her, because sometimes, yes, we don't have the words. And I think sometimes we also say too many words.
Yeah.
in these situations. So that's very true, and I liked what Connie had to say there.
So Gloria says, when you are depressed, should you go see a doctor or a counselor or who? So I'll give that to Carla.
Both. I say both. The mental health advocate in me says, yes, please go talk to a counselor, but also go see your doctor, and they'll get you to the right avenue. I think it's important that if you even maybe think that you're dealing with depression, doctors have such insight right now, and the mental health world and the medical health world are trying to merge. And so I think it's important to see both. And I think it's important, and that was something that you and I talked about, Mom, like, I think it is important, like, to be able to talk to somebody like a counselor that maybe doesn't know you, and you can just kind of say everything, sometimes really does help. And they have to keep it confidential. That's, I mean, unless, well, that's a whole other ballgame. But unless, you know, they need to go get help. You know what? I'm just gonna say it because I say it to my 5-year-olds, and I say it to the kids at school. Like, if you want to hurt yourself, you want to hurt someone, or someone is getting hurt, then counselors are obligated to get some help. And that's an ethics thing and a legal thing. But honestly, like, it's important to go and talk to somebody. And I know we talked about that too.
Talked about that too, pastors. Now, the only thing I will say,
I agree.
The only thing I will say about pastors is that you have to remember that not all pastors are trained in every aspect of what you're dealing with or going through, but a pastor is someone that is a good sounding board, because they should be able to give you some good spiritual principles and things to help you in that area. And I'll also say this: find someone you trust.
Yeah.
Whether it's your BFF, whether it's your family member, whoever it is, somebody that you trust is also a good thing, is a good person to share that, you know, is going to, in this process, you got to remember, the process in this is that it's getting somebody to come alongside you, to stand with you. And that's really what it needs to be. So it's coming in and joining and helping that individual. So you can think of those things as well.
I agree.
Connie says, from what I understand, there is clinical versus situational depression, which that was something that you and Scott had talked about before we had started this evening. And then also Pastor says, just being there really works, Pastor Scott. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and just, you know, continually like texting and calling, and, you know, I know that sometimes we don't always respond, but if the Lord is prompting you to continue to reach out to that person, listen to the Lord, because there's a reason for it, you know?
Yeah. So as we are coming to a close this evening, I know that y'all had discussed shared some different scriptures with one another. And so let's go ahead and leave everyone with a couple of different scriptures that could be good for during a time that you might be battling depression, or maybe something that would be encouraging to someone. What were some of the ones that you had, Pastor Scott?
Well, I could give you all the ones I had from last week, because they fit here as well. But one of the ones I'll give you, or a couple I'll give you this evening, is Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Verse 28 says this: "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." You can read the rest of that yourselves, but I think the first part is key here. It's come to Him. Jesus is the answer. He is the best person to go to. One of the other ones I'll give you, and I'll give you several of them. I won't read them all. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. Actually, I think this is a good one to read. It says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." God has good intentions towards you from the start. So think about these things. And these are just tools that you can use that can help you in dealing with your depression. And these are things to me that are positive that you can look at. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. I'll just give the first part of that. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. You can read the rest. Isaiah 41:10. And then I'll end with this one. This is Psalm chapter 9, verse 9. It says, the Lord also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of troubles. So once again, in these scriptures, in these ones, it is the Lord is the refuge. He's your strength. He is the one to go to find answers for all that you're going through. So.
And we need to be Jesus's hands and feet. Like, we're here for you guys. You know, like, just. I mean, honestly, we're here for you guys. This is why we're doing these things, is to not just break the stigma of mental health, but to let you guys know that we're here for y'all.
Absolutely. And then, Carla, I would just like for you just to share again, just one more time. You had talked about it beforehand. You touched on it during this evening. Just about how you're here for such a time as this. I just want you to just bring that home, that and just that reminder that each and every person is here for a purpose.
I absolutely agree. That's my life verse, and I don't know how many times I have looked at a kid and said, you are here for a reason. You are created for this very time, and I believe that with all my heart. I didn't realize when it became my life verse that I thought it was just for me. How selfish am I? But I didn't realize how much I was going to speak it in to the lives of people and what God had planned. Isn't that interesting that your life verse ends up being, that kind of thing? So yes, you are called and created for such a time as this. God has a plan. I just love people.
So yeah, many thanks being given this evening for y'all just discussing this topic. I'm getting tongue-tied. And so just know that that is there here on Facebook for you guys to just take a look at. And so thank you all for joining us this evening. We encourage you to stay connected with us and follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages for future information. We hope that you'll join us again next week for an open and honest discussion on grief. We pray that you have a blessed week. Thank you so much for being with us with Shield of Faith Church Unplugged. Good night.
God
Bye,
bless.
guys.